Welcome to #Wednesdays Weekly, a weekly information session in collaboration with the voluntary sector and public sector partners. This week, the session is Too Great for Hate Crime Awareness session, delivered by Carlo Schroeder and Emma Salloway. Over to you both.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Carlo. Yeah, and there's Emma. I'm the community coordinator at the community safety team. And Emma, do you want to introduce your role?
Yeah, my name's Emma Salloway. I work for the council as the cohesion officer and also the link officer for all the community centres.
So both of us, Emma and I, there's always plenty of work to do. So there's a bit of overlap in some of the work that we do. And one of those areas where we work very closely together is hate crime and issues around Hate Crime Awareness Week. But it's also connected to other events throughout the year, such as Holocaust Memorial Day, Remember Srebrenica, and maybe events such as Black History Month as well, where we see there's crossover between some of the things that we will talk about today. So first things first, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through a presentation which Emma and I will share. And after we've gone through the presentation, fingers crossed, we will show you a video. And after we have done this, we can have a conversation. You can ask questions. You may have got your own stories to share or recommendations to make. So let us start and share the presentation. And I'm just putting on the video panel so I can actually see you. And then, where is it? Let me move the panel so I can make this presentation a little bit bigger for you and you can see better. Okay, so is that okay with everyone? Can you see this, or do you see any of my panel? Is there anything covered up in black for anyone?
Yes.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this then. Okay, so what this means is that we are going in blind. So I'm going to share. I won't see you. I will only look at my own presentation, and Emma and I will talk through this presentation. Okay, so now this is the first image, and this is quite iconic. I thought I put this there. No Irish, no blacks, no dogs. And as I can't see you, I would normally want your opinion on this, what you see. But I will just tell you what my thoughts are. Maybe make some notes. You can also, post your comments in the chat, and we can pick this up as we go through the presentation. But this is really an example post the war years of how norms have changed. How things were acceptable at a time, and these are anecdotally what people would say, that in pubs and bed and breakfasts or hotels, that some places would say no Irish, obviously no blacks and no dogs. In the context was, as you know, around immigration. And what is quite scary, what I think is really appalling, how two groups of people were equated to animals in this, and how we dehumanize people. And that's one feature that you will see in a hate crime, of this us and them and dehumanizing process. So let's go for the next slide. What is a hate crime? And we talk about protected characteristics of people that are impacted by hate crime, and where we have legislation to do something about it. So those protected characteristics are disability, race, religion, transgender identity, and sexual orientation. And we will get statistics and reports on the basis of these categories. And we encourage people to report, and the by far most common one is race, because that is the one that has got the longest history, whereas some of the other ones were introduced at a later date. So Emma will explain this, because this is now where, as what I mentioned, where we talk about later date when they're introduced. This is a good example of how things change and how new categories are included.
Okay, so in Greater Manchester, alternative subcultures also included in one of the protective characteristics, and that's kind of as a result of the Sophie Lancaster attack. I actually remember this happening and being really shocked about it. It was a, you know, it was all over the news. It was a terrible thing. So basically, while returning home, Sophie and her partner Robert were subjected to an attack in a park in Bacup in 2007. Sophie never regained consciousness and died 13 days later, aged only 20. And Robert survived following a week in a coma. Subsequently, Sophie's mum Sylvia started the Sophie Lancaster Foundation in her memory in 2009. And the foundation works with schools and youth groups and other agencies to challenge prejudice and deliver like anti-hate crime programs. There were 5 young men, I think, that were involved in the attack. And the 2 main perpetrators, Brendan Harris and Ryan Herbert, were only aged 15 and 16 at the time. They were convicted of murder in jail for life. Herbert is actually eligible to apply for parole next year in February 2022. So, you know, it's coming kind of to bringing all the feelings to the fore again, as it, you know, it will come back in the news again. Harris, his original sentence was 18 years, and that still stands. And I think the other 3 just received lesser sentences. So yeah, that's kind of why alternative subculture was added into the protected characteristics, but that's just for Greater Manchester. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Carlo? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is kind of following the recent murder of Sarah Everard over the last couple of weeks. There have been calls to include misogyny as a hate crime. So when we look at misogyny, it's described as the dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women. And most dictionaries give the definition of a hatred towards women, but modern use of the word also incorporate prejudice against women. So Alan Johnson, a well-known sociologist, defined misogyny as a cultural attitude of hatred for females because they are female. And fellow sociologist Michael Flood said that although most common in men, misogyny can also exist and be practiced by women against other women or even themselves. So in 2015, Nottingham police actually included misogyny to be recorded as a hate crime. And now the rest of the country are kind of following suit. So there have been calls to include misogyny as a hate crime in recent weeks. The government's been pressured by campaigners to toughen laws to protect women, particularly in the after the Sarah Everard murder. So forces in England and Wales will be ordered to record crimes motivated by hostility in the victim's sex. And this will be implemented from autumn, but that will be on an experimental basis, and a long-term decision will be expected after the Law Commission review into hate crime is complete. So hopefully then it will be included as another strand of hate crime. So,
it's interesting. It's interesting to see how things develop. You know, how we, you know, we started off with, you know, at times it was racism, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. and the campaigns in the 60s. Obviously, the apartheid in South Africa contributed to that discussion. And then as we moved on, things like, if we talked about religion, anti-Semitism was part of the racism discussion as well. And then we moved on, and we now have got disability, Islamophobia, which is under religion, and transphobia. And now we look at these new categories, which we talked about, misogyny and alternative subcultures. So you can see how what was once a norm, a behavior that was maybe not seen as wrong, is now seen as something that is a hateful behavior, showing something that is no longer acceptable in society. And I think this is an ongoing discussion we will see in society, and hopefully makes society for the better, and stimulates discussion, and then protects those that go through the horrible experiences of a hate crime. And now it leads us very nicely into what a hate crime is. So the definition, as you know, is any criminal offense which is perceived by the victim or any other person, very important, to be motivated by hostility or prejudice based on a person's race or perceived race, religion or perceived religion, sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation, disability or perceived disability, and any crime motivated by hostility or prejudice against a person who is transgender or perceived to be transgender. And one of the important things here, that's why I was reading it out again, is this perceived. So if you have got this perception that something is an attack on you, and I give you an example. So we held a hate crime awareness session a couple of years ago, and we talked about Islamophobia and other things. One lady shared with us a story where she had reported an incident of children vandalizing their property, egging the front door, besmirching the car, doing things and shouting comments. And the comments, so this was an Arab family, and the comments were bin Laden, bin Laden. The incident was recorded as antisocial behavior. And I let this pause for a moment. So there was bin Laden, and when you recall a few decades, not too long ago, since 2011, we had an increase of international terrorism committed by what we call Islamist extremists. And that has led to an increase in Islamophobia, as many Muslims and the Muslim community was perceived as a threat by many people, simply because some people in the name of that religion committed a terrorist act. And so when we have an incident like this, where someone shouts bin Laden, they're clearly, there's a hateful intent there, because they're clearly identifying that family as, I put my hands up in quotation mark, terrorists, which they are not. So what we see, therefore, is that this is an incident of Islamophobia, and it needed to be reported. And we actually reported this back and was referred back to the police that this was not recorded correctly, and that there should have been a different protocol of how to engage with that family, not just on antisocial behavior, which is a general disturbance and that affects people's lives, but there's quite a strong difference between a hate crime which specifically targets your possessions, your maybe commits violence against you, and is targeting the identity, and the victim will feel attacked of simply for who they are, and that has a bigger impact, according to research, much bigger impact on that, on the traumatic experience that individual will go through. So hate crime is one of the most traumatic experiences someone can go through, because you cannot change who you are. If you're simply being attacked of who you are, it's very unsettling and deeply troubling. So Emma, do you want to just explain what the difference between the hate incident is to a hate crime?
Yes, so looking at the slide, a hate incident is an incident which the victim or anyone else, like a bystander, thinks is based on someone's prejudice towards them because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, alternative subculture, or because they are transgender. But not all hate incidents will amount to criminal offences, but it's still equally important that these are reported and recorded by the police. Evidence of the hate element is not required. You don't need to be personally perceive the incident to be hate related. It could be enough if another person that was standing, perhaps a bystander, and a witness or a police officer thought that that incident was hate related. So possible examples of hate incidents would be verbal abuse, name calling, online jokes, threats, perhaps hoax calls, abusive text messages, online abuse, graffiti, harm to your home, your pet, your car, something like that really. So that's a hate incident. Still important to report it to the police so they can get a sort of all-round picture of what's happening really. So yeah.
And I think what we find in our work is that many people will simply say, you know, I've got a thick skin, I won't report it. And we have been in incidences where, you know, someone shouts racist or whatever, homophobic or Islamophobic abuse, especially, or anti-Semitic abuse, and people would just say, well, this is how it is. And then actually you say, well, no, you have to report it because we need to know what the actual data is. And when you have data, you're able to change things and change policy. Now let's have a look. So this gives you an idea of how many hate crime reports we have had. This is in 2016 to 2018. So it's a little bit out of date, and that's partly because Greater Manchester Police has had an issue with they have transitioned to a new system. So we're waiting for the new data to come through of what hate crime stats look like now. But nevertheless, I thought it's a useful thing to just illustrate how many hate crimes, how many hate incidences we've seen. You will normally see a spike, so maybe that's something worthwhile including as well, that you will see a spike perhaps after big events that shake British politics or a community. So it could be Brexit, where we have got a very divided discussion of around staying within the EU and outside the EU. And what that means is that it also fuels a discussion about who we are as people, identity. And so unfortunately, on the back of Brexit, we had seen a rise in hate incidences towards Eastern Europeans and others. Recently, we have had incidences around when Black Lives Matters last May, if you recall, the killing of George Floyd in America. Obviously, we had a lot of protests resulting from this, and those protests again had a knock-on effect that there were incidences of increased hate crime towards different communities. It's actually quite do you want to come in there, Emma?
Yeah, just to add, Carlo, that you know, following incidents such as the murder of Lee Rigby, that there were also a lot of tensions because he was a local person as well. He was from Middleton, so that was something we had to deal with at the time. And then, like you said, other kind of local events like the arena bombing, you can see a spike in hate crimes following events such as that. Yeah.
It's always a shame, you know, there are so many good messages out there, but unfortunately, when someone does something in the name of, a crime, so Manchester Arena attack, you can guess, if you have someone committing that in the so-called name of Islam, then the backlash is that some people will have Islamophobic behavior and will post messages. So these were the latest ones. So I should have pressed the arrow before. So that gives you an idea of actually the convictions and persecutions that have, which is very important. Prosecutions, so not persecutions, prosecutions that have taken place. And the reason why we put this here is to give a bit of hope that when you report, you know, people will get prosecuted and they will be convicted of crimes. And normally, I'm just thinking of an example. I can tell you that it's normally longer when there was a really good example the other day. I can't think of it, but I can always find this out again after our workshop. There was a good example the other day where something was first perceived as just an act of violence, And then it was reviewed and actually was seen as an act of hate crime. And when it was seen as a hate crime incident or hate crime, the sentence was larger, was a longer sentence and more severe. And so we do treat those crimes very serious because of the more traumatic impact that they have. So let's have a look. Now, we have, in the times that we live in now, during lockdown, more than any other time in history, many of us get our information and our source of our ways of communicating only through the online space. And needless to say that online has been a big concern around hate crime already, but in many ways, lockdown has exacerbated that. And there's been a lot of pressure on large social media outlets to change their policies, to become more vigilant in reporting hateful behaviors. And so online bullying and trolling, which is different, and we can talk about this, which is different to a hate crime, but obviously is part of the same group of aggressive behavior towards another person, name calling. And what you see here is that often Muslims, so these are examples, in Rochdale, we have had obviously cases involving people that are part of the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community who are Muslims, but who have been involved in criminal activities such as child sexual exploitation. And in the work that Emma and I deal with when we do the tension monitoring, and there are various groups that are deliberately targeting Muslims and trying to portray Islam and as the source for those sex offenders' activities. So out of this, there's a lot of Islamophobia that comes out of this, where constantly people say, oh, the CSE cases, the child sexual exploitation cases, it's because Islam permits this. And so you have these very toxic conversations. There's something similar that happened during COVID-19, where one group of people, when we had a large concentration of transmissions in particular neighborhoods. So at the time, this was within certain inner city areas where there were a large ethnic minority populations. And so we had a moment where people would blame, at one time it was the Chinese communities. This was more Manchester because we've got very, very small Chinese populations in Rochdale, but there was blame that the Asian community were responsible for not socially distancing and not abiding by the rules. And so these rumors were spread, and there was online hate that we witnessed as part of this. More recently, there were discussions about migration and refugees and asylum seekers. And you can see, that there might be labeled economic burdens or security threats, again, to do with terrorism, or criminals, because people perceive that it's people importing criminality from outside. So Emma had a interesting story of how online hate can impact on a family.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak about, because it's local as well, it's kind of more pertinent to us because the family are from Harewood. You probably saw them on Britain's Got Talent. They do a sign along with us. They require that do sign language. And Jade Kildruff, the lady in the pink, kind of leads that, and that's her little brother Christian. He's 5 and he's got cerebral palsy. So they were on Britain's Got Talent and they made it. I think they made it to the final. But recently they've been in the press locally and nationally just for the amount of online hate that they've had. It's quite unbelievable, really. And it's all been directed at Christian, who's 5. And they've received online abuse, disability hate, and even death threats. Jade says that 5 to 10% of the comments on their social media, because they have Twitter and Facebook and they've got thousands of followers, she says that up to 10% of the comments that they receive are full of hatred. So it's a really a significant number, and it just kind of shows the impact it has. You know, it's a 5-year-old boy with a disability that's being targeted by people online. And so I think she's been working kind of nationally with people to try and get online, you know, get more sort of resources to target online hate, because it's just, people are just hiding behind keyboards, you know, and getting away with it. So it's quite a sad story, really, that, you know, a little 5-year-old child is subject to this abuse from people. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that was kind of a local story, so I thought it'd be quite relevant to us to look at today.
And obviously, you know, what is it that any of us can do, you know, and I don't know whether you've heard the expression be an active bystander. So if you see someone that is suffering, maybe in online, you know, let's talk. So in the physical space, when you're out and about and you see a hate incident, what can you do as an active bystander? You can first of all be there for that person. You can obviously assess the risks and see how much you can intervene when an incident happened. But at the very least, be there for the person, ask for if they need help and support, maybe offer to report the incident. So I witnessed an incident, for instance. The couple that were targeted didn't want to report it. They said it happens all the time, but I said I'm going to report it on, and I used the online portal to report the hate incident. And my role was simply to say, are you okay? If you need something, obviously I was working in the council, so I was able to give them my card and simply say, if you need any help, support, please be aware. Maybe Emma, can you talk about the hate crime ambassador, what that means? That would be good.
Yeah, in Rochdale, we've trained, I think, almost 50 now, local hate crime reporting ambassadors. We commissioned Stop Hate UK, a national charity, to run the training. And so we've got 50 people who, the kind of, their role is to not to report it themselves, but to speak to people in their community, perhaps in everyday conversations, where people might say, oh, this happened to me today, and they can say, oh, do you know that that's a hate crime? And this is what you can do to report it. So it's more sort of grassroots community members, really, just trying to point out to people what hate crime is and encouraging, if they come across anyone that's experienced a hate crime, to report it. So like I say, we've got almost 50 now across the borough.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And obviously they will be very good at this active bystander, but maybe, you know, but anybody can be an active bystander. And we do hope that the hate crime reporting ambassadors are then encouraging others to share some of their skills that they have learned. I think that those links, they are not, they won't work when I click on this. So I won't click on the how to challenge hate, but it's just that there are resources out there. So you can find very good resources. We've got some here and we share them with you, that you can read up on what you can do. You know, when you're on Twitter, you see something, there are reporting mechanisms on Facebook, on Twitter. There should be, whenever you are in an online situation, there should always be someone who's the facilitator, that you can flag things up about behavior that you don't feel is acceptable. And remember, it doesn't have to be that just because other people don't feel it's a hate crime. If you perceive it as something that is not right, as we said, it's the perceived hate crime, the perceived hate incident as well. So you can, even if you are not the victim and you're an active bystander, but if you perceive it as a hate incident, you can report it and raise awareness about behavior that you feel is not right and is targeting someone's identity. Now here we have got some of the many useful sites. So in an absolute emergency, in a life and death situation, where when you're when you see someone else being harmed or you feel you could be harmed, it is always 999. It's the high risk. And when you see something happening, it's you could call 101 or also Crime Stoppers. And for less, if the incident isn't a high emergency, so something has happened and you just wanted to be reported, I would recommend to go online and report it if you're able to go online. Obviously, you've got the 101 number as well. The reason why I think if you can do it online is quite good is because it's very easy. You can do it on your mobile phone, you can do it on your computer at home, and it will get logged and someone will come back to you and will talk to you about the incident and see if anything else needs to be done. So you don't have to wait on the phone, you're there. Obviously, as I said before, if it's an emergency, you do have to call 999 and make sure that the support gets there as soon as possible. I don't know whether we still have got the hate crime. No, okay. So I was going to show you the hate crime website as well. I don't know whether I put it down here. Oh, yes, that's the one. Sorry. So I'm flicking through a little bit, but I wanted to show you this. Can you see this, or do you have any boxes at the top? Emma, is there something blocking the view? Or is it, can you see the full site?
Just see a couple of little black boxes, Carlo, just at the top.
Yeah, let me take this away because we don't want those. So now you can see better. So sorry, this is something let me put it here. So I wait for a moment. I know it takes a little bit of time to readjust. So just when you go online and you go on letsendhatecrime.com website, which is the Greater Manchester website against hate crime, you can see what is a hate crime. You can see the definitions again. And up there at the top right is where you can click. You click on that link and it takes you through the necessary steps, where to go and what to do and how to report the hate crime. It will ask you for things as the details, what happened, if you witnessed a car, for instance, did you take down the registration number, location, just as many details as you remember. So if you are witnessing a hate incident, do try to, I mean, it's easily said than done. Hopefully us giving the presentation will help you to maybe jerk that memory of yours and say, oh, I need to record this. I need to make sure I remember as much detail as possible, as you would do in any crime. The more evidence you have, the better it is, and the easier it will be for the police to do their job. Now, let's come out of share and then see if we can share the video. But what I do first is let's come out of share. And
right, so I just share my screen and I'll see if I can play. We've got a short video. There's kind of 2 weeks where it's Hate Crime Awareness Week. So we have a week in October that's national and a week in February that's Greater Manchester. So we have 2. So we try and do quite a few activities during those 2 weeks, and we fund local projects to deliver hate crime activities as well. We do quite a lot of work with Possibilities that's works with people with disabilities in Haywood, and we commissioned them to do a video this year, which is really good, just to use as a resource or to watch yourself. So I'm going to try and get that to play. I think it's just about 8 minutes, so just bear with me a sec.
Let's see how it works. And let's have a look if there's anything in the comment section. Can see it, but let's see if the sound will work. Yeah, sound works.
Oh, brilliant.
Good. You want to go full size, Emma?
Animals. They're animals, my mum said. I looked at her all naughty like. I said, Mum, because that's what I do when I'm mad with her. I said, Mum, animals are nice. They're fluffy and they're gentle and they just want to be loved. She banged the table with her flat fist like this, took a swig from a teacup and said, well, they're worse than animals then. Of course, she was talking about that gang that did horrible things to my best mate, Max. They should be locked up, not the animals. You'd love Max if you met him. We've known each other since we were kids, next door neighbours, besties. We did everything together when we were younger. I always liked him because he was different. His mum said he had a disability, but I couldn't see it. He was just gentle and kind and funny. Oh, and he just loved animals. They were kind to him, you see, whereas people could sometimes be horrible because he was a bit different. Funnily enough, all the trouble started with animals. Max came running up to me one day. Tears were running down his cheeks, and I thought, uh-oh, someone's been picking on him again. But I was completely wrong. "I've got a job," he shouted, and he punched his fist in the air. And then his lip trembled, and he said, 2 days a week in the pet shop. High five. I said, "Never mind high five. Come here, you bugger." And I hugged him so hard. After his first week at the pet shop, I went to see him there. He was so excited, he could hardly get his words out. He just started reeling off everything they had in the pet shop. "We've got rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, mice and rats." I said, "Hey, whoa, slow down, Tiger." But he just carried on. "And budgies, canaries, finches, cockatiels and rats." I said, "That's twice you said rats." He clasped his hands together and went all shy, and then just quietly like, he goes, "I love rats, I do." So, we're waiting for the bus home, and these 3 scroats come over, arms and legs everywhere, effing this and effing that, spitting all over the place. Proper nasties they were. One of them nudges Max and says, "Hey mate, is that your missus?" Max gets anxious and he starts gabbling all random like, "I'm Max Deacon, 29 Midland Road, OL10 4SY. I work in the pet shop over there, and we've got rabbits, mice, guinea pigs and..." He didn't get a chance to finish. They all started laughing and making jeering noises. The mouthy one sucks the snot from his nose into his mouth and spits this green slime all over the bus stop window. And then they walk off, and he shouts at Max things like "weirdo" and "numpty," and they all make these rude gestures with their hands. Well, the less said about that, the better. Max looks upset. "I wanted to tell them about the rats," he said. The next week, the scroats are all at the bus stop again, pushing and shoving each other and making a right commotion, till this stray Alsatian dog comes over, barking and growling, and he corners the mouthy one. He's not so mouthy now, nearly had to change his underpants. Anyway, Max sees this, and he puts out his hand to the dog, strokes it, and it goes all calm and licks Max's face. "He just wants a friend," Max says. Mouthy one gets up and stands behind his mates for safety. "All right, numpty," he says. "He just wants a friend, does he? What about you? Do you want a friend? We'll be your friend, won't we, guys?" The scroats make this cackling noise and just go, yeah, numpty, you can be our friend. You'd like that, wouldn't you?" You see, Max just thinks everyone's as honest as he is. So he says, "Yeah, let's all be mates, eh?" Well, it wasn't long before these so-called mates were asking Max to steal money from the pet shop so they could spend it on booze and whatnot. They'd arranged to meet Max after work. "Did you bring the cash, numpty?" the mouthy one says. "No," says Max. "If I take the money, the boss won't be able to buy food for the animals, and I love the animals. Anyway, it's wrong." Mouthy one gets mad and he punches the glass at the bus stop window, making it shatter. "All right, numpty," he says. "We are going to play a little game. It's called Bitch." "What do we have to do?" says Max. "Get on your hands and knees, numpty, and I'll show you," says Mouthy one, as he pulls a studded dog collar and a lead out of his pocket and puts it round Max's neck. "Now, numpty, you can be our bitch. Fancy a bite to eat?" One of the other scroats pulls out a pouch of dog food and forces Max to eat it. I don't know what it was that made me go round to see Max at the shop just at that moment. Animal instincts, you might say. I flew at them like a whirling dervish, and they all scattered. When Max had stopped sobbing and I'd calmed down a bit, we call the police. Because, you see, what they were doing was a crime. They call it a hate crime. When people are horrible to someone just because they're different in some way, that's a crime. It felt kind of good when we saw them being taken away in a police car and Max got to tell the judge how they'd made him feel. I got a letter from Max today. He's now working on a pig farm out in the countryside. He says he loves pigs almost as much as rats. Oh, and there's something else he loves. He's got a girlfriend. She's called Mimi, and he met her in the cafe at the farm. They sound good together, don't they, Max and Mimi? Oh, and he says that I should tell everybody I know not to put up with anybody being horrible to you because you might be different to them. If they call you names, ask you to steal or take your things, or if they do horrible things like they did to Max, just tell the police. Tell them it's a hate crime and you're not going to put up with it. Max says, let's look after each other and be kind to animals. I like that. Do you?
So when we talk about what can you do about hate crime, well, you may want to run a community project, maybe look at what your expertise are in your field, like possibilities focusing on disability, and say, well, we know we have stories that we collect through our service users, through the people that we engage with, and we can really present a good angle of what a hate crime looks like for many of the people that have disabilities. And likewise, there may be others that have got strength in other areas. So I think it's a really powerful example of what you can do to share the message about what a hate crime is. And I was just thinking about a presentation that a police officer gave a few years ago in, this was up in Lancashire. I went for a conference, and he shared how hate crime is a few years behind domestic abuse, how there was a time where certain things were not recognized as a crime, as something wrong. It was just what happened in society, but now they are recorded. And so likewise, as we demonstrated in our presentation, things as we move on, we may identify things that should really be identified as a hate crime. And hopefully the video showed a really good example of that. Now, thoughts, questions, reflections. I know the video is powerful, so I should have left you for a little bit to think about the video. So we just pause for a moment, and you can put things in the chat, or you can make comments.
Sorry, Carlo. The video is actually based on a play that Possibilities did a couple of years previously, and I think that was really powerful. That was performed at Rochdale Town Hall by professional actors. So I'll dig out the link for that as well, because that might be something people want to look at on YouTube, or perhaps using the work. Yeah, it is a powerful play.